let me just set this one up briefly here. This is going to be a little bit different. Usually we have stories about projects. This is really much more of a story about a person who has impressed me immensely. I will allow you to be the judge of whether you're impressed, but I found the values and the integrity of this individual to be something that really has taught me some important life lessons. So let me get into it. We're in the western part of the state. The town of Sandusfield is south of the Mass Pike. It's on that long stretch of the Mass Pike where there are no exits, thank goodness. And because of that, there's a lot of wild land out in that part of the state. And Sandusfield is one of my personal favorite places. So zooming in a bit here, I think it was our first Giving Thanks for the Land event. It was our first one where we had the family, the Rowleys, come and present the story of Lower Spectacle Pond, protecting Lower Spectacle Pond, 900 acres. Last Thursday night, Mass Audubon had our annual meeting, and Secretary of Energy and Environment Rick Sullivan came and presented a very nice plaque to Laura Johnson, our president, acknowledging the effort to protect Lower Spectacle Pond, working in partnership with the state, and the risk that Mass Audubon took in acquiring a one-half undivided interest in that spectacular property with the old growth forest and the entire lake and all of the other things that had. We became joint owner with a very difficult, very antagonistic developer, and that was a strategic move to block the development of that property. Working in partnership with the state, that is now the Otis Spectacle Pond Farm State Forest is what it is. Spectacle Pond Farm State Forest, 900-acre property. So if you ever want to go to a great place to take a walk, go fishing, canoeing, kayaking, that's a really special place. Really what I'm talking about today, though, the focus of the talk today is about this property over here. This is a future sanctuary that Mass Audubon has been working with a landowner in that area to assemble over the last 15 years or so. And we've put together about 1,000 acres of land at this point. It'll be developed and made available to the public at some point in the future. At this point, it's essentially a conceptual sanctuary. It's a future thing that will exist. So as we put that together, we looked at land ownership, the properties that we wanted to protect, and one of the ones that became very obvious is the property in red, owned by a gentleman by the name of Bob Minery. Bob lives very simply, very humbly. He lives in a very simple home with, really, in many ways, it's like going back 100 years. He has no electricity, no telephone, no running water. Dirt floor. Okay? Very, very unusual guy. He walks down to spring every morning with 2 buckets, fills them up, brings them back. He's done that his entire life. He lives very simply there, and he loves it. He absolutely loves it. The view across the street, and I apologize a little bit. This was the only one I could find, which I was a little disappointed when I went through my photos. This is a winter shot, so unfortunately you're getting a lot of the long distance view is blocked out by snow, I think, at the time. So I'm going to ask you to trust me. This is one of those views that just knocks your socks off. And because of that, the owner, Bob Minery, had received offers from developers weekly for his entire life, seeking to buy his property and develop it. He turned every one of them down and held on to his interest in conserving the property. Again, looking at the map, it was an obvious one for us to want to protect, and so we made contact with him, and that's when I learned of his tremendous conservation ethic. He was not looking to get rich on this. He had the opportunity to do so. His dream was to see it conserved, similar to many of the other stories that we've heard today. Also, interestingly, when I brought up with our development department this property. The woman who was here at the time, Betsy Watson, who many of you know, Betsy, she said to me, she said, "Wait a second, Bob Minery." And she looked in the database, and we found out that he had been giving $100 a year to Mouse Audubon for land conservation for many years. This is someone who probably never made more than $10,000 a year as a sheep farmer on that particular property. And so that's when I began to, that was actually my second clue. The first clue was the fact that he had turned down all those development proposals for all those years. The second was when I realized that he had been supporting us to the maximum extent that he could, and really was a very powerful thing. So I went to go meet with him, and he would sit out in his front yard in a lazy boy chair with a cat purring on his lap, sitting in the sun, and he was a very happy camper. And this is really the way that he didn't demand much, didn't want much. He had a stack of old Scientific American magazines that he very much enjoyed reading. Very articulate, interesting guy. He told me that if I walked a path in the back of his property, he looked at his watch and said, "Yeah, about this time, if you look on the outcropping on the right, there's likely to be a black snake out there sunning itself on the rock." Sure enough, black racer, northern black racer, was there on cue, and there were no wires sticking out or anything else. This was a real snake, and that was my third clue of what a special individual this was. Somebody who was very, very close to the rhythms of the land, the rhythms of nature, and knew his property front and back. So, actually, let me stop there. So, I'm not going to spend too much time on the fact that we conserved his property. We did. The individual that we've been working with to put together that larger future sanctuary provided the funding for it. He agreed to sell his spectacular property for $250,000. That was substantially less than the appraised value of that property. And the individual that we were working with provided the funds to do so, to acquire that. So we completed that transaction, and going back very quickly, what we decided to do is to carve out 5 acres around his house. So his total property is 60 acres, rather. We acquired 55 acres, left him with 5 acres around his house. The main reason why we did that is that we didn't want to trigger Title V inspection, the septic system inspection, because he had an outhouse. He didn't want to have plumbing and a real septic system. And we didn't want to be the ones to disrupt all of that. So that was the solution to that. And he has agreed, he has conveyed that property to us upon his passing. So that 5 acres will come to us as well down the road. So we paid him $250,000. And I was working on the Lower Spectacle Pond property at the time. It was about 6 months after we had closed on his property, completed that transaction. And I knew I'd be driving by his house, and I said, you know, I think I need to stop in and just see how he's doing and see what might have changed. This person who had been living so simply. You know, for instance, might he have a flat screen TV at this point? Or maybe at the very least a cell phone? I shouldn't have wondered about any of those things. Nothing had changed. I showed up. This is not actually a picture of him. This is the best I could find from Google Images. But it reminds me very much of his parents sitting there with the purring cat on his lap as I drove up, literally, just as I'd seen him so many times. Feeling content, feeling good, because he had conserved his property. But otherwise, absolutely nothing had changed. And that was probably my 5th clue of what a special person this was. Somebody had not changed in the least. Well, I was working with a landowner down the street, and in the course of meeting with them, this particular landowner has a horse farm, miniature horses for therapy, for children with spectrum disorder and elderly individuals. And really wonderful, wonderful people doing wonderful, wonderful work, a group called Hearts and Hooves of the Berkshires. And in the course of meeting with them, I noticed they had a brand new barn and all this hay being delivered to the barn, and a brand new trailer for the horses. And I asked them, I said, that's great, that's wonderful. You made some improvements. I'm really glad to see that. It looks like things are going well. And they said, I have something to tell you if you promise you won't tell anybody. So I guess I'm violating that right now. But you can probably guess it. Bob Minery paid for all of that for them. And that was my 6th or 7th clue of what an individual I was dealing with here. And there he is. So that's about what you need to know about my good friend Bob. Thanks very much.